A while back, I made a video going in depth with the Decibel system in Zenless Zone Zero, and since the system is going to be reworked in 1.4, I figured I'd make an update video to give you an idea on how the shared Decibel system would work. Fair warning, this is from the creator server, which is not final, so it is possible that some of these things could change. But otherwise, let's get started, shall we? First, I'll give a comparison between the actual Decibel gain rate between the current system and the shared one, and then I'll also show off 2 notorious hunts with the same team to show the new system in action. And yes, it will be using Zhu Yuan as testing because I think a lot of people, including me, are concerned about now our attackers need to build up their own ultimates. But spoiler alert, at least from my testing, it wasn't really too much of an issue. First, let's start off with the visuals. You'll notice that now for the 2 off-field agents, an extra bar appears next to their energy. This is an indication of how many decibels they have. Once it's full, it'll also have a little star symbol to let you know that your ultimate is ready. And then the biggest question I think is, how much do the off-field agents get? Well, from what I've seen, it's roughly 50% of whatever the on-field agent gets. I started off with a few basic attacks with Soldier 11 and Zhu Yuan, the same 2 agents I used for testing in the previous video, and it seemed consistent that the off-field agents were always getting half of whatever the on-field agent generated. But I was also curious if the devs tweaked the amount of decibels given for various actions, and they did. So I'll be comparing the numbers to the previous video, and I apologize in advance for any slight errors that may appear because there's no real breakdown of the decibel generation, and sometimes actions do overlap, but I'll try my best to explain everything. Starting off with basic attacks. Before, Soldier 11 generated 62 decibels in her 4-hit string without flame suppression timing. Now, in the new patch, she generates 79, which is roughly a 27% increase. Similarly, Zhu Yuan went from 93 to 119 decibels generated in her 5-hit string, also a 27% increase. And then for their EX skills, Soldier 11's used to generate 165 decibels, but now gives 212. Meanwhile, Zhu Yuan went from 136 to 173 decibels. Both of these increases are also floating around the 27-28% increase. Great news so far. It's kind of rewarding the on-field agent even more than before, so I think this does kind of address the issue of, oh no, now I have to use this agent on field to build up their own ultimate, because at least it is a bit faster now than if you were to do it currently solo. Next are the switch attacks though. Firstly, just like the last video, performing switch attacks do reward more points than dodge attacks. Soldier 11 only receives 61 decibels here for a dodge attack, but an assist into Zhu Yuan gives a whopping 326 points, while a parry into Soldier 11 also gives 338 points. Now the catch is that this chunk of points only go towards the character you switch into, but again, remember, half of that goes to the other teammates, so it's actually worth more all around. Next are the chain attacks. Again, in the old system, you would usually generate 200-ish points per chain attack, and that was of course for the entire team, but in this new system, you'll see here against this enemy, we only get 2 chain attacks, but just before we do our attacks, Caesar has 319 decibels. Zhu Yuan has 167 and Bernice has 180. Now, after initiating the stun with Zhu Yuan, we use both Bernice and Caesar's chain attacks. At the end of this, Caesar now has 691 points, Zhu Yuan has 433, and Bernice has 551. So, Caesar and Bernice went up by about 370 each, which makes sense since they both used a chain attack, but Zhu Yuan only went up by about 266, which, if we assume that 50% came from the other 2 chain attacks each, then that would mean that a chain attack itself gives the attacker about 240 decibel points. So, if all 3 were to use a chain attack, you'd get just under 500 points for each character. 240 for their own, and then 240 because 120 from the other 2, which depending on how you think about it is technically way more than before. Yes, you could get 600 for one agent's ultimate in the shared system, but now you're getting 1,500 points, it's just that it's spread across all of your agents. Next up are the anomaly and disorders, and bear with me because these are the hardest to test. First, we'll have Soldier 11 apply Burn with her EX skill. She starts off with 762 points, and then after her EX skill, she goes up to 1099. Now, if we take into account the 212 from her EX skill, in fact, you can actually see a tick up just before applying the anomaly points, but that means that the burn proc gives us only a total of 125 points. Then we have Bernice. what about if her burn is applied by a different agent while she is off field? Well, here we see that she has 1,192 points. And then once we trigger the burn using Zhu Yuan, when we switch back to Bernice, she now has 1,333 points, which is a 141 point increase. Now it is possible that this was also 125 decibels, similar to when Soldier 11 applied her burn, and then maybe there was a little bit extra coming from Zhu Yuan, who did her own attacks, which again transfers some points over to Bernice as well. And then disorders. So before this, I have the enemy primed and ready to go for ether and burn anomalies. Bernice has about 2,029 points just before applying her burn with her EX skill, and then after everything she has 2,386 points, so an increase of 357. Now if we assume that the burn was 125 points like before, and that Zhu Yuan's anomaly gives about 60 points, and then Zhu Yuan's skill also gives 85 points, then that means that the rest of the points for the disorder were only about 87. But again, it may not seem like a lot, but you have to remember that disorders can be procced much more often than something like, say, stuns, and inherently, to get a disorder, you're also triggering anomalies and whatnot along the way, which also provide decibels. Now, these anomaly values are actually somewhat lower than what I tested before in the shared system, where an anomaly would actually give 175 points and a disorder would give 80 points. But again, you have to remember that you're effectively getting double whatever the amount in the new system is, because it gets spread to the other agents as well. Now though, onto some live testing. For this, I did 3 runs against the weekly Pompeii boss on both versions, using the same team both times. Now I will admit, the stats are slightly different between the 2 versions, because it'd be impossible to get the exact same disc rolls. But I tried my best to play in both versions the same way I would now currently. And across the 3 runs in the current patch, the average time was about 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Now I will admit, I do have Zhu Yuan's first cinema mindscape on the current patch, which I think significantly helps her on-field presence, since it gives her more enhanced bullets. So for the updated system, I did 2 runs with her at Mindscape 0, which I think is a bit more realistic for many people out there, and then another run with her at Mindscape 1. But surprisingly, even at Mindscape 0, the clears were slightly faster at around 2 minutes and 7 seconds, and then with her Mindscape 1, it went down to just under 2 minutes at 1 minute and 59 seconds. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think these few seconds will matter. I'm sure you could probably speed things up or slow things down by, say, not using Nicole's ultimate and instead just using her skill, since you no longer have to worry and sit through that animation time. But if you were in any way concerned about, oh no, Zhu Yuan or any burst style character for that matter is going to fall off because of the whole changes, then you have nothing to worry about. The 50% generation rate is actually a pretty healthy amount, and once again I will admit that because I have her Mindscape, I am sort of used to switching into Zhu Yuan every now and then already. So if you've been playing her in a way where you literally do not send her out at all until you have the enemy stunned and with an ultimate ready, then maybe things will be a bit tougher for you to adjust. And actually, speaking on that topic of waiting until the enemy is stunned, I feel like with this new system, I've actually gotten better at not hoarding my ultimate. Because before, oftentimes, I was so hell-bent on I need to use the ultimate when they have the big damage multiplier on the stun, that I would end up getting to a point where if I had just used the ultimate as soon as possible, I probably could have gotten back another ultimate by the time I did end up actually using it. And I don't know, maybe it's the mentality of having more ultimates to use and where you can like space them out, but it did make me feel less hoardy when it came to the ultimates. Otherwise though, I do think that the changes to the Decibel system are perfectly fine. My biggest concern was that it would be a pseudo nerf to certain characters, but I'm glad that this was not the case. And instead we get to have flashier battles where we actually get to use everyone's full kits now. But as always, if you found this video useful, liking, commenting and subscribing is greatly appreciated. And it'll also help you keep up to date with any news and guides that I put out in the future. So until next time, bye bye.